What makes something political? For Carl Schmitt, the answer is stark and unsettling. The political arises when human groups distinguish between friends and enemies. This is not about personal hostility or mere disagreement. It is about the existential possibility of conflict, the kind that divides entire communities and may ultimately demand the willingness to kill or die. Schmitt argues that politics is not defined by debates over policy, values, or resource distribution. Instead, it is constituted by a fundamental division: those who belong to us and those who pose a threat. The friend-enemy distinction is not a metaphor. It's a real, decisive separation that gives politics its unique intensity. Crucially, Schmitt views this distinction as existential. It determines the survival of a group's way of life. To identify an enemy is to declare that some other collective threatens your identity, your values, or your continued existence. The political, then, is the realm where this possibility of violent conflict is always present, even if not always realized. This is what sets Schmitt apart. While liberal thinkers focus on consensus, rights, and deliberation, he insists that the essence of politics lies in its intensity, in the ever-present potential for us versus them divisions that could erupt into war, civil unrest, or revolution. Whether we like it or not, Schmitt claims, all politics is ultimately grounded in this basic confrontation. Carl Schmitt believed that liberalism misunderstands the nature of politics, and in doing so leaves societies dangerously unprepared for real conflict. At the heart of his critique is the idea of neutralization, the liberal attempt to tame politics by reducing it to procedures, debates, laws, or economic exchanges. Liberalism, Schmitt argues, treats politics as a matter of rational compromise. It assumes that disagreements can be settled through discussion, voting, or legal adjudication. In this view, politics becomes administrative, about regulation and governance, not existential struggle. But for Schmitt, this depoliticized vision is an illusion. It ignores the fundamental fact that some conflicts are not negotiable, and that political life can never be fully reduced to economics, law, or moral discourse. This is especially dangerous, he claims, in times of crisis, when the survival of a political community is at stake. No legal norm or market mechanism can substitute for decisive action. Liberalism, in clinging to procedure, becomes paralyzed in the face of real threats. Democracy, legalism, technocracy all fail when the stakes become existential. Schmitt argues that by refusing to acknowledge the ever-present possibility of friend-enemy conflict, liberal societies lull themselves into complacency. They assume that peace is permanent and that consensus is always possible. But when a true political crisis arises, only those who recognize the limits of liberal neutrality will be ready to act. For Schmitt, to depoliticize politics is to misunderstand it, and to leave a society defenseless when force and decision, not dialogue, determine the outcome. Carl Schmitt's most influential and controversial idea centers on the concept of sovereignty. For Schmitt, political power cannot be reduced to legal frameworks or constitutional procedures. Instead, he offers a stark definition: sovereign is he who decides on the exception. This deceptively simple sentence reveals a foundational truth about politics. The ultimate authority in any system is not the one who applies the law, but the one who has the power to suspend it. In ordinary times, law governs life through stable norms and procedures. But what happens when the rules no longer suffice, when there is a revolution, a terrorist attack, or a national emergency? Liberal constitutions often try to cover such moments with clauses allowing emergency powers, but Schmitt sees something deeper. The decision to suspend normal law reveals the true center of power. The state of exception is not a breakdown of politics. It is politics in its purest form. Emergencies strip away legal fictions and reveal who actually holds decisive power. In a crisis, someone must act. They must decide who is protected, who is excluded, and what rules still apply. No law can predefine this. It is a decision, not a norm, that brings order in moments of existential threat. This is why Schmitt sees liberalism as fundamentally naive. Liberal democracies hope to constrain politics through abstract principles, procedures, and legal guarantees. But the state of exception exposes the limits of this faith. When survival is on the line, sovereignty cannot be delegated to committees or delayed by debate. Action becomes necessary, and the legal order depends on someone outside the law who can restore order by temporarily suspending it. This raises a troubling implication. Every legal system presupposes a moment of extra legal authority. No rule is absolute because all rules rely on the ability to decide when they no longer apply. In Schmitt's view, political order does not begin with law, it begins with power. And the ultimate test of power is who can decide the exception. This notion deeply influenced later thinkers, from Walter Benjamin and Giorgio Agamben to contemporary debates on emergency powers, constitutional breakdowns, and authoritarian populism. Whether embraced or rejected, Schmitt's theory forces us to confront a disturbing question. Can any political order survive without someone who can stand above the law when it matters most? Carl Schmitt's political thought is grounded in a stark realism about the human condition. At the heart of his theory is an anthropological pessimism, a belief that human beings are not naturally harmonious or rational actors who will peacefully agree if given the right procedures. Instead, Schmitt insists that conflict is a permanent and ineradicable feature of political life. For Schmitt, the essence of politics is not negotiation or consensus, but the ever-present potential for antagonism. Political identity is forged not just through shared goals, but through the drawing of boundaries, distinguishing between us and them, friend and enemy. To deny this is not to transcend conflict, but to mask it. And masking conflict, he argues, is far more dangerous than acknowledging it. This brings Schmitt into direct opposition with the liberal ideal that politics can be reduced to procedures, rights, and norms. He is especially critical of utopian projects, those that claim to have overcome division and achieved a final, harmonious order. Whether it's the dream of perpetual peace, the end of ideology, or technocratic governance, Schmitt sees all of them as illusions, attempts to eliminate political struggle through abstract principles or managerial neutrality. But for Schmitt, peace without the recognition of conflict is not true peace. It is a political anesthetic. These utopias of reason suppress the fact that power and exclusion still operate, just under the surface. The result is not a free society, but a hidden form of domination. In the name of neutrality, liberal institutions may delegitimize political opposition, label dissent as irrational or extremist, and deny people the right to define themselves through real political engagement. This is what Schmitt means when he says the political disappears. When politics is treated as a technical problem to be solved by experts, or reduced to economic management and legal rules, the space for genuine confrontation, real decisions between competing visions of life, is lost. But this doesn't eliminate conflict, it merely drives it underground, where it festers and grows. In Schmitt's view, only by acknowledging the permanence of conflict can politics remain honest and legitimate. He does not celebrate violence, but he insists that any political theory that pretends conflict can be overcome through reason or institutional design is profoundly naive. Worse, such theories pave the way for authoritarianism under the guise of consensus, where those in power declare politics settled and silence their opponents as threats to peace. This political realism has been both condemned and admired. Critics argue that it invites cynicism and authoritarianism. But admirers say Schmitt offers a crucial reminder that politics is about decisions, about stakes, and about the reality that people will not always agree, and that any system pretending otherwise risks becoming tyrannical in the name of harmony. Ultimately, Schmitt's realism is a call to face political life as it is, not a realm of endless agreement, but a space of irreducible plurality, confrontation, and choice. Carl Schmitt remains one of the most controversial figures in modern political theory, not just for his ideas, but for what he did with them. In the early 1930s, Schmitt publicly endorsed the Nazi regime, accepting academic and legal positions under Hitler's government. He used his theory of sovereignty and the state of exception to help justify the suspension of constitutional norms, aligning law with the will of the Führer. Though he later fell out of favor within the Nazi elite, this collaboration casts a long shadow over his intellectual legacy. And yet, Schmitt's ideas have refused to disappear. Over the decades, they've resurfaced in multiple political traditions, sometimes admired, sometimes feared. In legal theory, his critique of liberal constitutionalism has sparked enduring debates about emergency powers, judicial activism, and the limits of procedural governance. In international relations, realists have drawn from Schmitt's rejection of moral universalism, emphasizing power, interest, and conflict over liberal idealism. But Schmitt's most lasting influence may be in our understanding of modern politics itself. His friend-enemy logic, the idea that political identity is forged through opposition, has gained renewed relevance in an age of deepening polarization. Across the globe, we see populist leaders framing politics as a moral struggle. The real people versus elites, patriots versus traitors, order versus chaos. This isn't just rhetoric, it reflects a Schmittian structure where politics becomes existential and compromise is seen as betrayal. Likewise, his notion of the state of exception has become a touchstone in analyzing how governments respond to crises, terrorism, pandemics, mass protests, by expanding executive power and suspending legal norms. Scholars like Giorgio Agamben have extended Schmitt's framework to argue that the modern state increasingly operates in a permanent state of exception, where emergency becomes the rule. Despite or because of his troubling past, Schmitt forces us to confront difficult questions. What holds a political community together? How do we balance legality with survival? And what happens when institutions can no longer mediate conflict? Schmitt does not offer comforting answers, but his work compels us to take politics seriously, not as a space of endless discussion, but as a realm of decision, identity, and danger. In an era of fractured democracies, culture wars, and contested sovereignties, Schmitt's shadow remains both illuminating and ominous, a reminder that the political is never neutral and never safe.